Hello, I'm Cara Dahl Russell. In week 4 of our series, Courtly Love and the Cult of the Virgin, we focus on the religious ideal. Today, the Crusades, troubadours again, and Eleanor again. Early on this month in our series, we brought forward the importance of troubadours in developing the songs of courtly love and how these poor knights were an intrinsic part of the knightly battlefield scenes. They remained an intrinsic part of the Crusades as well. Surely some form of singing around the campfire has been with us since the dawn of time. I'd like to put together some of the events and people we've discussed into a little timeline to help clarify how entwined these elements have been. You'll notice most of these things are only 1 or 2 years apart. We'll start with Charlemagne. He lived from 742 to 814 and raised the idea of a noble, devoted, faithful warrior. Gregorian chant, monophonic music, was sung in churches beginning around 800. The first troubadour, Duke William IX of Aquitaine, was born in 1076. Hildegard von Bingen, born 3 years later, 1079. The First Crusade started in 1096 and went until 1099. The People's Crusade, to free the Holy Lands, proclaimed by wandering preachers and led by Count Raymond IV of Toulouse. 23 years later, Eleanor of Aquitaine was born in 1122. The first troubadour, Duke William IX of Aquitaine, died 4 years later in 1126. 1136, now in her 50s, Hildegard von Bingen was made head of a Benedictine convent. 1143, the first confirmed group espousing Cathar beliefs. 1144, the Second Crusade began and went until 1155. Intended to attack Damascus, led by Holy Roman Emperor Conrad III and by King Louis VII of France, the first husband of Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor was forced to come on this crusade because Louis did not trust her to stay behind. The crusade was considered a massive failure. 7 years later, 1163, Hildegard von Bingen speaks out against Catharism, and it's the same year, 1163, the construction of Notre Dame Cathedral begins. In 1167, the famous Court of Love is established by Marie de Champagne, daughter of Eleanor. Hildegard von Bingen dies in the 1170s. In 1173, Peter Waldo began the Waldensian movement, a precursor to the Franciscan movement. Andreas Capellanius writes De Arte Honesti Amandi, The Art of Courtly Love, sometime between 1174 and 1186. A year later, the Third Crusade begins in 1187. It goes until 1192, and it was led by Eleanor's son, Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, and the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick I. Richard made a truce with Saladin. And 8 years later, by the year 1200, polyphonic music, music that required vocal training, was being sung in churches. In music in general, during this time period, alongside the secular vernacular chant of troubadours and trouvères, there was the monophonic Latin sacred chant still cultivated in the monasteries. And now, by 1200, an entirely distinct repertory, that of the new polyphonic or part music, which flourished not at court nor in the monastery, but in the great urban cathedrals of the north, especially at Notre Dame de Paris. In his work, Early Crusade Songs, Richard L. Crocker states the remarkable aspect is that this polyphonic repertory has practically no instance in crusade songs. So the polyphony was something really new and distinct, a form of music that required vocal training. Troubadours, more than any musicians of any other genre, responded to the Crusades. It is even thought that several directly participated in the fighting. The name troubadour itself may even have been derived from the Arab tarab, or minstrel. It is recognized that troubadour songs also lie at the origin of the Western tradition of high lyric poetry, upholding the ideals of chivalry translated neatly into zeal for the similar ideals fueling the European crusaders. And arguably, the direction of the influence was also reversible. What troubadours brought back from the fighting, if they returned, was reflected in their songs, and the songs themselves often close with an envoi, lines that send or commission the audience. Frequently studied under the discipline of literary rather than musical studies, troubadour texts are now being re-explored by experts who believe they deserve, by their musical nature, to be examined in conjunction with their melodies. The difficulty in examining the melodies is that the songs themselves were highly unstable. This is called mouvance, the effect of multiple transmitters of songs, singers and musicians, where each transmitter took some license with the song's text and melody. Transmission occurred through trained performers, but also friends and patrons of the troubadour singing the songs. We see this continuing in music well into today, but especially in the 1600s, as court musicians traveled around Europe and their works were learned, copied, and both mislearned and improved upon. For example, the works of Cesare Negri have been found in manuscript form, written down after his death in the late 1500s by another musician in other countries, but still attributed to him. And even today, musicologists discover works by composers that have been hidden in a foreign library, sometimes copied by another hand or rearranged. That is all direct and indirect mouvance. The resurgence of folk songs in the 1700s and early 1800s found multiple versions of melody, multiple versions of text. So we find printings of the same folk songs that can be very different in word, music, and even rhythm. So that's why it can be hard to have historical accuracy in troubadour songs. And that's why this recording by Drew Minter is exceedingly rare. It combines the musical drive and heart with the scholarship to unearth and clarify these historic songs.